Our political panel is back. Ron Brownstein, CNN senior political analyst, opinion columnist at Bloomberg. Matt Klink, a Republican strategist and owner and president of Klink Campaigns Incorporated, and former Democratic Congresswoman Katie Porter, all of them with us, although Ron looking especially good in that shot there. And I think you've got some, we need Ron more FaceTime for that. What you got new information?
Well, no, I'm just looking back at the exit poll from 24. You know, there's a lot of focus on whether Democrats can come back together in this race. And you know, given the Trump, the way the Democrats view the Trump administration as an existential threat to everything they care about, maybe they will. That can't win the race in Michigan. I mean, Michigan is not a state you can win by base mobilization. In the 2024 exit poll, Democrats were 31% of the voters, Republicans were 34%, Independents were 35%. Democrats will probably outvote Republicans in this election. They're more energized. But nonetheless, you know, you probably have to win or stay very competitive among independents to win this race. And that is kind of the real issue. If El Sayed is the nominee, you know, can he reach beyond the kind of the Sanders vision of the movement? And there are strengths in that. He's bringing out a lot of young people. He's going to be very strong with college-educated voters. Can he remain competitive in white working-class Michigan, which is an awful lot of voters there?
Matt Klink, you're shaking your head.
No, look, I think that Mike Rogers' team is going to carve up El Sayed pretty good. It's going to be a really ugly race, probably a race to the bottom. I don't know how El Sayed can get back anywhere close to middle when you talk about movements and the things that he talks about. He's positioned himself on the fringe of the Democratic Party, and I think that the Republicans are going to drive that home over and over and over again.
Congresswoman.
Katie disagrees.
It's not the French. The man is poised to win in a swing state. It's not the fringe. This is half.
He lost half the Democrats.
Yes, so did Stevens.
Right, that's
so
the problem.
My point is, so did Stevens.
And very distinct.
So you can't characterize it as the fringe when it's fully half in a purple state like Michigan. I would say, to your point about, you know, Michigan being about a third Democrats, about a third Independents, and about a third Republicans. That's what Orange County was, give or take, when I ran there. And I will just say, I think the biggest myth in establishment Democratic politics is that swing voters, that independent voters don't care about things like Medicare for all. They don't care about getting money out of politics. In fact, they care more about those things than base Democratic voters, who are often wed to the establishment they have.
Well, isn't it also passable, Matt, that he brings out new voters? I mean, a lot of people thought that Donald Trump couldn't win. And then he brought out a bunch of people who were animated in his base, and he expanded his own base. I mean, couldn't El Sayed activate people who didn't feel impassioned by the Democratic establishment?
It's very expensive to do that. Donald Trump had the money. El Sayed does not.
But does he need it? He just lost. I mean, AIPAC spent against him $70 million.
He does need it. To turn out voters, you need money. Else, he got money spent against him in negative ads, but to get people to educate them and encourage them to turn out, that's very time-consuming and very expensive.
Mobilization is expensive.
He'll get a solid youth. I mean, if he is the nominee, he will inspire more youth turnout than she would. But you know, it's an older state. It's like it's hard to win that way. Ultimately, you have to be competitive with the electorate that exists. A majority of the voters, or at least roughly half the voters in Michigan, are going to be whites without a college degree. That was not a good constituency for him in the primary. There are obvious cultural issues, defunding the police. I mean, there are a lot of places Republicans are going to go. Having said all that, I just go back to kind of the basics. Donald Trump's disapproval in Michigan is 60%. No Republican won in his first term in a state where his disapproval was that high.
I mean, part of the conversation, Congresswoman, has been over this concept of electability and some frustration, especially from El Sayed supporters, that the most electable person isn't always elected. You look at Hillary Clinton, there was talk about her being the most electable and Joe Biden being the most electable. And sometimes you ended up with a candidate where there wasn't a lot of passion behind them. Is it time to rethink this concept of who is electable?
Yeah, I hate this concept because I think who is electable is who is actually getting elected.
Yeah.
So you can talk all you want about how you don't think Sayed is electable. Take a look at the number on your screen. He is actually, I believe, tomorrow morning, going to get elected. And you know what that means? That means he's electable.
No, but this is the undercard. I mean, the primary is the undercard. I mean, even the supporters. I was talking today to the person who runs the Progressive Change Campaign Committee, the Elizabeth Warren Group, and they said, look, this is our proof of concept. We've been arguing for years that if you let us, you give us the nomination with these economic populists in a swing state, we can win. Now we actually have to go out
and do it.
And look, and you have Jocelyn Benson.
Not in a state like Vermont.
Not in a state like Vermont.
Not in a state like Massachusetts.
Right. Or in a district, the commie corridor in New York City, as they call it. It's not my phrase. But look, Jocelyn Benson, the governor, is probably going to win substantially. So, the governor candidate for the Democrats, can he stay within 7 or 8 points of her if he is the nominee and get by? That's entirely possible.
And can you see them campaigning together?
I can't. Look, I can. They both were very clear. One thing we talked about, their speeches were very different in tone and length. But one thing they both were very strong and very consistent on, and I found them both stylistically different, but to be emotionally believable and genuine in saying, we will come together to beat Mike Rogers.
Yeah, and to Mike Rogers, Matt, is the danger for him that he looks like, especially if he's running against El Sayed, the establishment candidate
100%.
in a year when people are looking for change.
Yeah, Mike Rogers cannot run as an outsider. The guy's a former CIA agent and a member of Congress. He cannot run as an outsider.
I mean, is that a tough hand to play right now?
It's a very tough hand to play. He has to paint El Sayed as a kook.
Yeah, who has welded himself to Trump in a way that was not a true.
Wait, Ron, what's that stat again you were telling everybody?
Oh, yeah, no, look, I mean, yeah, exactly. I mean, that is the stat. Maybe this is different. Maybe the image of the Democratic Party is weaker than it was in 2018 and 2020 because people were disappointed in the outcomes of the Biden presidency. So maybe the old rules don't apply. But that was the pattern.
As you've talked about often, sometimes Susan Collins has been able to go against the rule in the past.
But she's the one.
And so maybe Mike Rogers is able to do that.
And he would seem to be positioned to do that.
Is there also a danger, Congresswoman, in alienating the Jewish vote and in alienating folks that are supportive of Israel, which obviously we know there are plenty of folks in Michigan who are not. It's clear that the AIPAC funding went both ways, and it certainly inspired some of El Sayed's supporters, but that folks that have voted Democrat for their entire life are saying, I cannot support that.
That is definitely a faction. It is there. I think it's a question of how big it is. Voter-wise, it's definitely a significant sort of noise factor and money factor. But I think we have to realize, there are a lot of younger Jewish people, progressive Jewish people, whose views about Israel, they might not be El Sayed's, but they're not Stevens's either. Yeah, and so I think there is an opportunity here for I think El Sayed's going to have to be more careful, more thoughtful, more disciplined if he wants to heal that up a little bit and be able to draw in those voters who really are core Democratic voters, but they're worried about where the Democratic Party is going on Israel. I think he has some work to do if he's going to pick those folks up.
I agree with you. Neither one of them are kind of overlapping where the center of gravity is in the Democratic Party. She did not move enough, clearly. I mean, she only the most perfunctory criticism of Netanyahu, who has a 5% favorability rating among Democrats. 80% of Democratic voters in Pew have an unfavorable view of the Israeli government, and she just would not acknowledge that, I think, or kind of, and I think that is a lesson for Democrats going forward. They're going to have to respond to that. You don't have to go as far as El Sayed, but to simply kind of stonewall and say nothing is going to change in our relationship, I think is not attainable. But I will say that what this means for the Democratic Party going forward, this is not the final inning. I mean, if he is the nominee and if Francesca Hong is the nominee, the socialist for governor in Wisconsin, 2 of the 3 states that are absolutely most important to Democrats getting back to the White House in 2028, states that Trump's dislodged from the blue wall, whether they win in November, I think is going to have a big impact on whether the left goes into 28 with a lot of momentum or is significantly deflated.
And because if he wins, then the thought is potentially Bernie couldn't get there,
Right.
but maybe AOC can.
Totally.
Maybe we have
Or
taken over the
or
party.
Ro Khanna or someone like that. Absolutely push the envelope because they will have some successes.
Yeah,
under it.
if he doesn't win in this year, I think the left candidate in 28, assuming he's the nominee, the left candidate in 28 is going to face a lot of skepticism among Democratic voters about whether you could really win back the White House.
Fair, you know, it was Bernie didn't win, Elizabeth Warren didn't win. And here we go again. So, like, this movement has had legs. The left, kind of more progressive.
And they were
movement.
really close with a lot of people
Every
pushing
time.
against them. And if you've got a candidate from the left in 28 that is able to sort of clear the path, if that's
Yes.
AOC, probably Roe
Yeah.
doesn't run against her,
Right.
Yeah.
then they've got a lane all to
totally.
themselves.
Totally.
And you've got Gavin, and you've got Josh Shapiro, and Pete Buttigieg, and everybody
as
else.
one consultant calls them the Steves. I
Yeah.
mean, there's like a whole
Or
bunch
it's
of
like,
them.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like the equivalent of like Fox News Channel,
Yeah.
right? You've got everybody on one side, and then everybody else has got to split up everything else.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know, look at the primary. Look at the House races tonight. I mean, the story of the Democratic primaries this year: most systematic conflict between left and center, I think, in modern times, but no clear winner. No clear winner. The center has plenty of wins: Iowa, a Senate, California governor, a lot of the House race. Missouri won tonight. The left has plenty of wins. Michigan 7
At the end
tonight.
of the day, these are still, I think it all gets lost. These are still candidate races. We are electing people. We are not electing ideological
Or concepts.
movements.
Right.
You don't go to the ballot and vote progressive, liberal, moderate. You go to the ballot and you vote for a human being. And I think that's, at the end of the day, why we're seeing it go back and forth, state to state.
And the answer is that either side can win in 28. That's what it tells you.
We're going to sneak in a quick break.